Hi everyone, my name is Deepak. I have 15 plus years of experience in this field. So let's get started. This is the agenda for today. We are going to talk about Microsoft Azure. Before Azure, we are going to know about cloud. What exactly is cloud, the evolution of it, and the cloud computing. Then we are going to jump on the Azure part because we believe if your basics are clear, then you can achieve everything. So here we are going to start with the very basic thing. What is the basically cloud? What was need of the cloud? The different components of it, and what is Azure? Then we are going to talk about introduction about database. What exactly is a DB? Different type of Azure database that you have. Along with that, the architecture of Azure database and some other services for Azure database. So this is basically the certification training course, the things that we are going to teach you and you are going to learn. So we are going to basically start, if you're going to start with this certification course. So the way we start is we start with what exactly is Azure Architect course, what exactly are the different type of certifications, like we used to have AZ 303, 304, which is going to be end of life. Now we have new certification, how basically the Azure is evolving, how is basically Azure is progressing, the different certification number, and you're going to perform the hands-on on it. You're going to get a greater learning. Then we are going to talk about what are different type of virtual machines that you have in Azure and different type of networking that you can do in Azure, which is one of the biggest myth. I think it's there in the industry. People think that since this is a cloud managed platform, you cannot create your own VM. Some people think that you can create the VM, but you cannot have your own network. Like if you have some on-premise environment, some people think that you cannot customize your own network, like you have class A, B, C, D, E, C, Ds. You cannot have all those kind of things over there. So you're going to learn about Azure Virtual Machine and networking, and you're going to perform the hands-on on it. Then we are going to talk about Azure VMSS and availability zone, which is Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set. What Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set is like, this is one of the greatest feature I really like about Azure, wherein you can increase or decrease the resources automatically without manual intervention, without human intervention. You can just define the criteria. You define the criteria, and based on that, you can automatically scale up or scale down the resources. Next one is again the hands-on on it. So we make sure that for everything that we are going to cover, we are basically going to give you a good hands-on training, because you know that in this today's industry, in this today's world, along with your theoretical session, it's very good and it's very, I would say, mandatory to have the practical knowledge. So we make sure that you are going to have an opportunity to perform the hands-on on each and everything that we are teaching in the class. After that, we are going to teach you about Azure, what are the different app services that you have in Azure, and what are the functions of it, what are the different features. After that, we are going to do a hands-on. Then the next module after this, we are going to start in the course. If you are planning to take a course from us, this is the entire actually architecture. After that, we are going to talk about Azure hybrid recovery and site recovery and the hands-on. Then we are going to talk about Azure storage solution, the different type of storages you have. In the case of Azure, you have 4 type of storage, basically file, cube, log. So all the different kind of storages we are going to talk about, what are design patterns for the same, and the hands-on. Then we are going to talk about Azure Kubernetes services. So Kubernetes, Docker, each and everything you are going to learn, which can be linked with Azure and the hands-on. Then we are going to talk about Azure Active Directory and role-based access control services, which is known as RBAC. Role-based access control is known as RBAC, and your Active Directory is known as Azure, which is AD. Then the hands-on on it. Then you are going to learn about Azure monitoring services. What are different type of options that Azure provides you through which you can monitor, and the hands-on. And lastly, you are going to learn about Azure migration. How basically you can migrate the content from on-premise to Azure, like which is one of the biggest challenge that people face, because the companies already have their on-premise environment. Now they want to migrate from their on-premise to Azure. Basically creates a big issue. Like the companies like where they have a big bottleneck with the network and all, it creates like one of the biggest issues. So we are going to learn about it. So that's the entire certification training course, and at the end, you are going to have a cape like this, and you're going to become a professional superhero. Just kidding. So you're going to get a certification from us where you'll be ready to hit the ground and get a good job. Now let's talk about Azure. Before we talk about Azure, let's first of all understand what exactly is cloud computing. We know that, okay, now the things are on the cloud, we access the things from the cloud itself. This is something which is in the high demand, but what exactly the cloud is? So basically, I will tell you the evolution about it. When we started with cloud, we started putting the data online, because one of the biggest challenge without the cloud was that, let's say if I want to share the data to someone else who is in a different city, different country. Now, if I had to share something, let's say some maybe some Excel sheets, some of the maybe soft data, I have to use a physical medium, maybe a wire through LAN, or maybe I have to put it in a pen drive or a hard drive or external drive, and I have to ship it to him, which will take tremendously, a very long time, specifically you are in a different country. Now, what we did in the case of cloud is we have a hosted service, the service which is hosted on the internet. You're going to store something over there, and you can give the permissions. People can download the data from there itself. That was the advantage of using the cloud. Now, in the case of cloud computing, what we did, we basically evolved more. So when this concept was introduced, people really liked it, and we got a greater response from the market. We realized that what's next we can do. So we realize that there are one of the biggest thing that we can try to resolve for the people is, because people who are on the cloud, like let's say I'm putting the data on the cloud, that's a good thing that I can, but it started creating a lot of mess when so many people are accessing the data at the real time. Now I will tell you one of the example wherein, let's say, a person who works in a company in India, and he works for a company who has, let's say, 100 branches in different cities, different countries. So of course they are going to be different time zones, and this is basically a sales company which basically sell the insurance to some people or something. Now what they are doing is they are putting some data over the in their Excel sheet about some of the companies. Now maybe like they are working with the same client, different time zone. Like for example, they have sold the insurance to all the HCL people. HCL is in India, HCL is in Americas. So the person who is in India, he put like, for HCL, he's going to put the name of the company HCL, and he will say that number of people to whom he has sold insurance. He will put it as 20. Now the person who is working in US, maybe he will access the Excel sheet to update, and he will realize that, oh, it's for HCL is already there. Then he will think that maybe he forgot to update this Excel sheet. So he will think that I have sold to, let's say, 30 people. Now again, in India, person will come that we will think that, oh, why is 30? It should be 20. Or maybe he has maybe done more sales. He's going to make 22. So that was the biggest problem, how to have handle this kind of situation. Now some people said we can have multiple copy of it that we started, but it was not practically possible. Think about a scenario wherein the company have, let's say, 100 branches, and in the 100 branches people have 100 different let's say, 100 different locations. Now you're going to have 100 version of the file. To find which one is accurate, it's going to be a very tedious task. Now what we did, we tried to fix this thing, wherein how we fixed it, we basically got a solution wherein we can put the entire data online. But what if we can access the data in a real time? That point, that was one of the biggest boom, wherein once you are storing the data on the internet, you can access that entire data in the real time, and you can make the updates. Like you use SharePoint and all nowadays, wherein I have an, let's say, Excel sheet I posted online, and you can access online, and you can make the updates, you can read the data. That is going to be accessible to everyone. Now that was one of the biggest advantage of using the cloud. Now we realize more thing, like what's next we can do. Now I'm going to tell you two problem statement, and if you're able to understand those two problem statement and solution statement, you are basically going to be clear with entire cloud concept in any field you go. Now let's say in the first use case, there is a guy like started his own startup company because he thought that he want to start his own business. He does not have that much budget. So basically what he did, he hired 10 developers. He gave an old configuration laptop because he don't want to spend that much money on the infrastructure. So the old laptop that he gave, let's say, was holding Windows 7, maybe 250 GB of hard drive or 2 GB of RAM. Now he got a project from another company which will require heavy softwares like Visual Studio and different softwares, for which he will require, let's say, Windows 10 and minimal 4 GB of RAM. Now what he has to do is he has to purchase a new laptops. If he's going to purchase a new laptop, it's going to be a huge investment to have 10 laptops with paying the cost for the license, paying the cost basically for maintaining it. At the same time, he has to wait as well till the time the laptops are not purchased or assembled. So it's going to be like he has to spend that money, and he has to invest the time on all those kind of things. Now what we can do in this case is we can take advantage of Azure. So how we can take advantage of Azure is, what he can do is like he can spin up a resource on the cloud with a specific configuration he needs, like maybe 4 GB of RAM, Windows 10, and he can give that file, RDB file, to all different people because since they already have a laptop, they will be able to develop the project from there itself. Now, the good thing is that he is going to save the time, save the money, because maybe after 6 months he does not need it. Like he need for a different project, whatever they have to do, whatever the configuration they have, it's already up to date. So he can save the time and he can save the money. Now let's say in the other use case wherein a person who is working in a big company, they don't have a budget constraint, so he has a very good configuration laptop, let's say 1 TB of hard drive, 16 GB of RAM. He got a use case from one of the customer where he has to build the entire solution. In order to build the solution, he will require a couple of virtual machines. He will not be able to, let's say, deploy all the virtual machine on his system, because his system, let's say, can run 3 virtual machines in parallel, and he has to run 9 virtual machines in parallel. So it's going to take support of different laptops or different hard drives. Now, let's say he was traveling once he developed the solution, and while he was on the way during the transit, he lost his hard drives. He lost his, let's say, laptop. It's going to be a big nightmare for him, because once he has traveled and with the hard drives, and he has informed client that I will be presenting the solution to you, after waiting for 2 months, client was expecting something, and if they will not get anything, it's going to be a bad impact on the company's impression. Now in that case, you can leverage cloud for that, wherein you can host the resources on the cloud and it can be accessed anywhere you want. So even though the guy, let's say, he lost his laptop, he was traveling with a single laptop, if he has a desktop over there in the organization, he's going desktop, like laptop, anything with the internet connectivity, he can showcase a solution to them. So that was one of the biggest thing where the cloud was a winner and cloud has evolved. So as if you are able to understand this thing, trust me, then if you talk about any of the cloud platforms we have, for example, we have, Microsoft has provided you Azure that you're learning today. Google have their own cloud, which is GCP, Google Cloud Platform. Your Amazon have their own cloud, which is known as AWS. You will be able to understand, you are going to get a fair understanding about this. So that's the beauty of cloud, wherein you do it anywhere you want. And at the same time, now cloud is coming up with so many good features. Like, for example, you have a security, a greater amount of security. Like in the case of specifically, if you talk about, Azure, it's giving a feature of key vault, where it provides a greater immense amount of security. Now, let's talk about Azure. What exactly the Azure is? So Azure is a cloud computing service which is created by Microsoft for building, testing, deploying, and manage your applications through Microsoft Data Center. Since this is introduced in the Microsoft, DC only. Now, why basically database? So the thing is that the database is required to maintain your data, to manage your large amount of data, to like a way basically through which you can update your data, and you have to provide data integrity, where if the data is basically changed, you want to have a way to figure it out that whether the data was changed or not. But what exactly is a database? So you can say that a database is a kind of a organized collection of data which is stored and accessed from a computer system. So like database can be more complex if you have so many logics involved in this, like there are the concept of primary key, foreign key. Along with that, the database size is huge. So it can be like much more complicated. What are the different type of Azure database? So if we talk about, there are 3 type of Azure database: relational, non-relational, and the in-memory database. Now, if you talk about Azure database architecture, as one of the biggest advantage of Azure is that the first is you can build a virtual machine and you can deploy your Azure resource over there for database, or you can use the concept of database as a service, wherein you will be able to access database directly without having any kind of platform. Now, you are using the concept of database as a service. You don't have to deploy any VM for that. You just launch up, spin up the resource, and you will be able to access directly. And you get all the features here, like you will be able to perform monitoring. If you want to migrate from your on-premise environment to your cloud, you will be able to do it using Azure Database Migration Service. This is again Azure SQL Data Sync, wherein you can have a real-time sync. Like let's say sometimes what we want to do is I want to run my database at my on-premises, but I want to store the logs at cloud. That is again possible. So mix and match combination is possible. So you can have Cosmos DB, Data Factory, each and everything is basically supported here. Now, if you talk about Azure Database Service, it basically provides you support on various databases like Cosmos DB, Azure Data Factory, so Azure SQL Database. If I talk about the very first one, so there are various implementation techniques. Like some of the techniques are that you can use single database, you can use a managed instance which is going to be managed by different customers as well, like same instance used by different customer, but it's going to be isolated for you, so no one will be able to see your data. And it basically use the concept of elastic pooling, similar to like AWS that gives. If you talk about purchasing model, it has 2 type purchasing model. One is a week purchasing model, and the second is DTU purchasing model. So basically, SQL data can be used as a service without deploying anything, or you can use a virtual machine and you can deploy it directly over there. Next one is the Cosmos DB. So Azure Cosmos DB is a NoSQL database store. So I mean, basically this is different from the traditional relational database that we used to have. In the NoSQL DB, you are not going to define any kind of schema at all for the table. In every item or basically row within the table can have different type of values, so different type of schema. So if you talk about in terms of architecture, this is the architecture. It looks like you have a DB. Under that, you are going to have a Cosmos account. Under that, you have a container. Container will have your user-defined functions, triggers, stored procedures, items that you are going to define. Next one that you are going to have is ADF, Azure Data Factory. So it's basically you have the process like this, where you are going to connect and collect the information. You are going to transform into a different format. You are going to publish. Once that is published, you are going to monitor it. So you can say this is basically a data integration service based on the cloud, which allows to create the data-driven workflow in the cloud for automating data movement and data transformation. Now it has even different components like activity, data set, triggers, link services, control flow. It supports everything. Now, if we talk about the use cases, there are plenty of use cases for SQL database. If I talk about one of the use cases that you can use it for development or test environment. Now, before you go in a production, you want to develop something. For that, you can use it. One of the other use cases is business continuity. If you're going to use Azure service for your production environment, and let's say your primary environment got down, so Azure provides you 99.99% resiliency. So you are going to have multiple copies of it. The next one that you basically have is scaling out read-only workload. So in this case, like I said in the beginning, Azure provides you flexibility wherein you can have a concept of scaling, which is based on which you can automatically scale up or scale down the resources, which basically gives you the immense advantage. And the next one, the last one, is basically the backup and restore. So based on which you can easily back up and easily you can restore the data. So like you have, for example, a couple of versions of database that you have created, you can basically create different versions of backup and you can restore it different versions. And these are the again some of the common use cases that you have. You can have plenty of the use cases, but these are the most common one that you have. Now, if you talk about some of the Cosmos DB use cases, and this is advanced analytics. If you talk about Cosmos DB use cases, it has like plenty. You can use it for IoT, you can use it for gaming, you can use it for web app, you can use it for retail and marketing. So these are some of the use cases for your Cosmos DB. Now, if you want to perform a small practical demonstration for the same, so this is the Azure portal, the way it looks like. And let's say if you want to create a resource, it's going to be created under resource group. Let's say I have a requirement wherein I want to give my virtual machine to someone else, and I don't want him to use my Azure portal. So I can seriously and very easily spin up a resource, and you know that whenever you deploy a virtual machine, it takes like n number of like minutes or hours, like at least 40-50 minutes, right? In this case, everything is going to be quick. Let's say I want to create a virtual machine, give it a name as Deepak, give it a name as test VM. Region, you can select any and provide a username and a password. So you can, if you want, you can select all the ports here, and then you basically click on review and create. So here it happens that there's a corporate account, so sometimes it happens like that. It's going to come up automatically without changing anything, so that should be fine. Click on create. It's going to create in a moment. So it's going to be deployed in hardly less than 2 minutes. Here we go. Now here you can see your resource is basically being created. So you can directly go on the resource. Now, one of the biggest advantage, if basically, I would say that if you're basically creating any kind of resource on your local machine, like for example, simply you're installing the Windows, you know that like installation of Windows generally take an hour or so. Even though you are creating a virtual machine, like you're using VirtualBox, you're using ESXi, you're using any other tool, you know that takes time, right? Even though this is on cloud, some people think that okay, it's on the cloud, so it's going to have a huge latency because the traffic is going to go from your network to the cloud and it's going to come back. It's going to have a huge latency, which is not true. That was something you have basically seen in this case, how fast it is. So it's not like that. Now, let's say I have created this virtual machine and I want to give the access of this virtual machine to someone else, like someone else who is not part maybe of my organization. and I'm very skeptical if I'm going to give the access of my like let's say this account to someone else, and he may try to misuse it. Maybe he can try to view the data, he can try to maybe perform some kind of brute force attack or something. So I'm not so particular about it, and I have that kind of fear in my mind. So what you can do in that case is you can just basically spin up the resource for him. And one of the biggest advantages of Azure is that if you want to use certain components, like there are certain attributes, certain stuff that you want to use, it's not mandatory that you have to always use, like you have to provide the access to that person. Without giving them access, that person will be able to have access of this. Now what you have to do is here, like let's say, I mean, this is a resource I downloaded. I mean, I created for a guy whose name is ABC. I don't want to give him the access. I just want to have the access of the resource that I have created, but without having the access on my Azure portal. That something is my use case. Now, how you can achieve it? Simply, like in this case, you can simply click on connect, click on RDP. It's going to download an RDP file for you. So you click on RDP file. Once that RDP file is going to be downloaded, you have to just click on it, and it's going to prompt you to provide your credentials, wherein you have to use the same username and password that you basically has set in between in the beginning. So here's provide username as Deepak that I provided, and the same password that I used. Now you'll be able to connect to the VM directly. Just click on yes. It's going to come up in a moment. It's going to come up in a moment here. For the initial first time, it will take, I would say, hardly less than a minute, and then it should be good. It will be there shortly. Now here we go. The resource has been launched here. Now you can see this is the machine that I have deployed. This is basically your 2019 server. Now, without having access of Azure, anyone basically can use this virtual machine, and he don't have to basically manage, like you see this 2019, he don't have to manage, and he don't have to basically get any kind of overhead. In just fraction of like would say less than 2 minutes, it's just created and deployed. Okay, guys, so that's one of the way. Then another way is that, like if you want to use, let's say, database as a service, then in that case you can even create the database instance as well, and you will be able to see use database as a service directly. Like for example, you want to create a direct database resource here, so you can simply click on SQL DB, and you can basically directly deploy the database resource here. Like you can use the same resource group like that I have created, provide a database name, give it as database test. Even you can select the server. If it is not there, you can select the one that you want, provide the entire details, and you will be able to launch the database as a service. So that basically is the immense advantage of using the cloud. No having a dependency of the server, having zero dependency on all the other areas basically. So thank you for joining this today's webinar, guys. It's an immense pleasure to connect with all of you. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.